Hey, Chris, thank you for coming in to this interview. You definitely have a great background, whether it's with Accenture, Finastra, and the Dubai Future Foundation, definitely in SAP, MENA, and a great educational background as well, whether it's that, say, Xavier University or UBC, so the
Yeah.
Daughter's School of Business. So you've done a lot. And I actually feature your Dubai Future Foundation a Global 50 report. You're a principal author, leader in that, the one that came up for 2025. So thank you again for all of these remarkable contributions to the world.
Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah, just to be, it was the 15 use cases that came out of Dubai Center of Artificial Intelligence. So just to clarify, but yeah, it's the Global 50 report is definitely one of the reports that we look to and that inspired us basically for any kind of programs that we wanted to launch within Dubai Future Foundation. So it's a monumental report for Dubai Future Foundation and for Dubai, and it's always interesting to learn what the new mega trends are looking like in the future.
Okay, so first of all, Chris, if you could maybe talk about three inflection points in your life that made you who you are today. And it could have been when you're 3 or 5 years old. It could have been inside, outside school, in the family, outside family. Could have been a mentor. Could have been early jobs you've had. It could have been challenges you experienced. So it could be a variety of different things that really created this wonderful person you are today, and just an amazing career you have as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think point number one would have to be my time at UBC. I remember while I was first studying in the original cohort, so the first couple of weeks, we had a teacher come in and teach us something called design thinking. And I remember as she was explaining different tools and mindsets on how to apply, design principles to strategy and business, the light bulb went off in my head, and I realized that this is something that I'm really interested in, very passionate in. I wanted to learn everything more about it. So I think for one, that kind of inspired me to take a look at innovation, and especially from a design and design principle background, understanding human-centered design, what the needs and the wants of the people, and then how to build products and services and design strategies that are aligned with the people's wants and needs. So that's number one. Through my work, I was working at Accenture at the time, and I got a random letter in LinkedIn from an SAP recruiter here in Dubai, and they asked me if I wanted to be the head of innovation for SAP for the region, and I was completely aghast. I frankly didn't really know much about Dubai, where it was, and 5 months later, I found myself on a one-way ticket, um, all by myself to a unknown land, and landed here and started my journey as the innovation head for SAP. So that would be number two. And number three happened just recently, actually. So the day that ChatGPT launched VoiceGPT, I was discussing, I gave it to my 6-year-old son and let him play with it. And he played for about an hour and a half, asking math questions and English questions, science questions, call me Dr. Poopy Pants, whatever the case might be. And I was so inspired to see the new wave of potential that AI could offer yeah, the younger generation. And when he went to bed, my wife came down, and I was so excited to share it with her, my experience with my son, and she was completely against it. She said, I don't know where this information is going. I don't know what's being said to him. I don't know what he's saying to it. So we kind of parted ways that night with two different, very different views. And while sitting on the couch, I realized that she was right, and that I was right, and that this sort of spawned my current research, which is I'm currently started a doctorate in business administration, focusing on building responsible AI frameworks for children, specifically ages 12 and under. So that would be the three main catalysts, I think, for life.
So that would be upon your reflection, some of your milestones. Now, let's go a little bit earlier in your life. And I mean, you went to UBC and you were got sort of motivated into design, right? But earlier than that, when you were in your early grades and stuff, were you interested in things like sciences, or arts? I mean, because you have a design innovation thinking. So did you have entrepreneurship in your background or in your family experience or your greater experience that kind of lent you towards innovation and design and things like that? Were your interests in high school or in the primary grades, was it very broad, or were your interests in business as well? I mean, what were the things that were driving you when you were really young?
I think so. When I was really young, actually, from so even going back all the way to grade 3, I remember I came home and I told my mom that I had made the chess team
Yeah.
and that I had to go to Toronto because I had placed second in all of Ottawa for grade 3 in chess. So I went to provincials, and my mom asked me, she's like, "When did you learn how to play chess?" So I think from an early on, I was always in enrichment class, um, studying a little bit beyond what are some of our classes were doing in primary school. And at the same time, I also had difficulty in learning. So I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was very young, and I had to try and figure out how to manage my creativity side, which was basically spawning from the ADHD, I like to say, and then my very mathematical sort of strategic side, which is the chess brain, I guess. So growing up, um, my parents, my mom and my stepdad actually started a business within the house. And at one point in time, we had about 16 people that were working daily inside the house.
Yes.
Um, it was a global operation for corporate housing. And I always wanted to steer clear away from business just because of that. So I decided to go to university when I was 19 and study law. So I took English and political science, and I quickly learned that when I got to university, I was not there to learn. I was there to have fun. And 3 years into my degree, I actually failed out of university and was forced to take a mandatory year off. And during that year, I spent working for my parents for as the head of operations, learning business, understanding strategy, learning finance, basically from my parents and from operating in the business. And from there, when I went back into university the year following, I decided to take up business because I had taken an interest into computers and started building computers from scratch at home, started fixing them, working with the IT teams, and that kind of sort of generated or spawned my interest in terms of IT, the management of information systems, and business. So I finally clued in after a few years. So that, I guess that's where it kind of started all from.
So that's really, really fascinating. So you had an early interest in things like being logical and methodical. That's the chess side, right? So and becoming quite very, very good at it. And then you're in enriched classes, but you had this creative energy side too. Uh,
Correct.
and you had to manage kind of the intersection between the creative energy side and then this kind of mathematical, more logical side. And that would produce some kinds of challenges as well, but it would also open up opportunity because you'd be very innovative in your thinking. And yet
Definitely.
your parents started this in at this business, which was operated out of your home, and you were thinking, I don't like that environment. I mean,
That's exactly.
like you said, 16 people. So that would kind of maybe accentuate the more ADHD part, right? And where it's kind of maybe a little bit more chaotic. And then
Yeah.
um, and then you're saying, I don't want that. I'm going to study law. And then, you go to university and then you find, you know what, that's not really for me. And it's really interesting that um, when you were in university and taking that year out was actually good for you. Right?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
was
It
actually
was.
a great turning point because that would be an inflection point because then you went back and you could then, and you worked for your family business and then you could understand the nuances and the requirements and you could see the practical side of finance or the practical side of business and things like that. And you could see how that integrates with the things that you're doing earlier in your studies, but from a business standpoint, right? And then so that's really really interesting. So and then you took an interest in things like putting computers together and building from scratch. So this integration of technology. So now you have this kind of logical part, which was early science. There's a tie-in or link to the IT side and putting together computers and taking them apart because there's a logic. There's a kind of a process for doing that, right?
Absolutely.
And then you're tying it into innovation, but translational innovation, which is business oriented. So now you're tying into the business side and you're integrating all of those. And then that gets into entrepreneurship. So you get interested in this thing, the Sauder Africa Initiative, which is about
Yeah.
entrepreneurs capacity building in Nairobi and Kenya. So I can see how that ties together as well, right? Because the entrepreneurship, the innovation, the tech, entrepreneurship typically has some kind of tech involved in some way.
Yeah.
So describe that journey, and then you end up getting an MBA, right? In
Yep.
let's say sustainability and innovation. So it's the innovation part, but then there's this kind of social aspect part as well, social responsibility part. So was that social responsibility part sort of magnified by, like you helped establish a school in Kenya, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got some great stories to share. So I think so. All of this spawned what I kind of skipped over is in the first 3 years of my undergrad. When I failed out, I actually turned into a professional DJ during that time. And so I would be, out at clubs or festivals, DJing until all hours of the evening. And that was kind of me releasing my creative side when I was 19, 20, 21. And during these times when I was going to music festivals and things like that too, I learned an appreciation of, like you're saying, sort of like the social, the gatherings, the social communities, you know, things like hanging around in a hippie circle and understanding how, communities work in very small places and how you share and collaborate amongst each other with very little. So that that kind of sort of culture really resonated with me. And so when I transferred over into my MBA, I tried to think about how can I take that culture that I really appreciated of my youth and when I was DJing and being creative and meeting all different kinds of people from different walks of life, and how can I bring that into the business aspect? So that's where sustainability came in. Now the Sauder Africa Initiative is it's a yearly adventure that UBC has partnered with Strathmore University, which is in Kenya. And for 2 weeks of the year, a lot of undergrad and MBA students go down and we teach an entrepreneurship course for students in the slums. So what we would do is basically go down and every day the students would gather at a certain shanty within one of the largest slums in Africa. And we would teach them a full-on business course, starting from strategy, marketing, finance, everything to help develop a product or an idea. And then ultimately what we would do is certify them. And then they could take that certification and then go back to any kind of bank if they needed collateral. So instead of putting your parents' bed up as collateral in order to get a loan to start a business, this was almost a piece of paper that was guaranteed by a University of British Columbia in order to help kickstart and help fund some of these projects that were growing from the slums. Now, this program had been going on for about 4 or 5 years, and the head of the program, the professor that was there, asked me to take a look at this in a holistic view and said, can we set this up as a permanent solution or a permanent school that's continuously operating within Kenya throughout the year? So it wouldn't be just 1 year, or excuse me, 2 weeks. It would be actually 4 or 5 different cohorts that would run throughout the year. So I went down about 2 months in advance and actually lived in the slum in Kenya. And I got to know the lay of the land, how people operate, how governments operate, different things in terms of power, how to generate power, and different kinds of power struggles in between the police and government on setting up different programs or schools. So the whole culture and the way of sort of building an actual school inside the slums is completely different than what perhaps maybe you and I would sort of think about going to a school in, Ottawa, where I'm from, or Vancouver, for example. So that was the kind of program. So I spent basically 3 months building a business plan and partnerships to help stabilize and set up a sustainable entrepreneurship school in the largest slum in Africa called Kibera.
So that's really fascinating. I mean, again, if you have a lot of challenges, that's actually good for innovation, right? You learn a lot. The more challenges you have, the better the kind of the learning experience and the skills that you'll be building in this. And then that would accentuate this aspect that you can have social impact, but you could do it through programs that empower and give skills and capabilities to others. And there's innovation that's part of that. You served on a nonprofit board as an innovation director as well. So, and you got design thinking involved, because design thinking is really about innovation, right? And so how did that leap occur from doing all of this background work and getting your MBA and then getting into like Accenture? What were the steps that to get into, or even before that, maybe? Well, I guess Accenture, and then you got into SAP. So how did you get into Accenture?
So after I finally finished my undergrad after 7 years, and Accenture was doing a campus visit, and they were trying to select some of the students to come and work. And through in my last year, I was doing 3 different internships. One was for an e-commerce professor. One was actually setting up an SAP basis environment for the entire Canada. So for all of the universities that wanted to run SAP in terms of the courses, we hosted the environment and our servers at St. FX. So I was also responsible for sort of building that. And when Accenture came down, they were just basically asking questions in terms of, what's your background with ERP systems? How do you understand e-commerce? And the interviews went very well. So much so that they actually sent me an offer about a week before I graduated, said, as soon as you're finished and you're graduated, you could start, ironically, on my birthday, June 26th, that summer. So I moved from Nova Scotia, drove to Toronto, lived with one of my best friend's brother, and started my journey at Accenture as a junior analyst, learning how to do SAP implementations in HR. So I spent 4 years doing that, and then moved around to a couple of different areas, and then eventually left the consulting world because I just wanted something more. And I'd always wanted to complete an MBA. So while I was at Accenture, I was, writing my LSATs and my GMATs, excuse me, at the time. And and then I finally got into my MBA. And then when I left my MBA, I got an internship with a sustainable strategy firm after about 3 months. And then one of my old bosses actually called me back from Accenture and said, hey, we've got this great role for you. Would you be interested in coming back to Accenture as a innovation director? So it was too hard to turn down. And that's where I was for until I got that random letter in LinkedIn from SAP. So it's kind of,
But it wasn't really random, right? Because people are following you. You have exposure when you're building innovation. You have exposure when you're doing all this design thinking, creative leadership foundation kind of work, right? So
yeah.
you're not doing it in a silo. You're not in a bunker.
No, 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 absolutely. I had no idea that it would be valued as much to have someone from halfway across the world, take a leap of faith in you and say, yes, we're willing to, pay for your relocation expenses, pay for everything for you to come down and help us run this, right? With no experience in the Middle East or understanding in the way the culture or anything like that. So that's what I meant by it was kind of random.
That's all random. It's very targeted. It's like Harrison. I interviewed Harrison, right? It's the same thing. He got this sort of offer. And he was going, well, where did that come from?
Right.
And of course, he's now this, strategic kind of innovation director at or head of it at EN, right? So I mean, they're expanding really a lot. So I can see how all the pieces fit. Then your undergraduate kind of interspersed with real life experience and how that would just grow you together with your family experience, right? Would grow
Yep.
you. And in fact, it's because of that kind of chatter, in a way, sort of guided volatility that it actually
Well
created
put.
this wonderful background you have, and including the second offer for Accenture, right? Because the pieces fit innovation into Accenture. So all the prior pieces, including your SAP experience and doing things like that within Accenture, and then getting some more other diverse experience, and then getting the offer to innovation director.
Yeah.
That's a perfect fit. And then of course, people are tracking you, and then you get this offer from SAP MENA for customer innovation, principal
Correct.
specialist, and driving digital transformation with enterprise clients. So, and you spoke at Comex Oman, right, in 2015, how the Internet of Things.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. I did actually. That was you know what? That was one of my favorite talks I've ever done. Because it was just at the start of IoT and helping to understand where IoT was going to take. And we were just having conversations about digital twins. And I actually built a storyboard and took people through a story of what it would be like to actually fix the fountain at the Burj Khalifa if we had IoT sensors and predictive maintenance embedded within the fountains. And it was really, I could just tell that, when you look out in the audience and everybody's kind of captivated with what you're saying. And so it was one of my favorites because it was just it was pure story. That's all it was. It was imaginative kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and I could see this now fitting into your work and contributing to Dubai Future Foundation, the Global 50s Opportunities kind of report, right? And then really being a big contributor, the main contributor to the 15 AI use cases in governments. I could see all these pieces kind of tying together. And then, so how did how did this SAP work then go into this Finastra Global?
That's another great story. So I was about 4 years, almost 4 years coming at SAP, and the CEO for the region at SAP had left about 1 year prior, and had moved on to Finastra as a COO. And he called me up one day and asked me if I was bored, and I said, "Okay, I'm listening. I'm listening." And he said, "Look, even though this is a fintech company, uh, this place is completely it's a dinosaur land. It's completely archaic, and I need someone to come in and basically change the culture, infuse value selling, infuse design into our services, and really help build that sort of like human-centered design around Finastra, around the fintech, so that we can start operating this to the banks." So we we had a few discussions about this because I was a little bit worried that I knew nothing about financial services at all. And he promised me that no worries, I could learn. And I was surrounded by many, many experts that I could definitely learn from. But where they really needed is they needed to learn from me as well. So it was very much a bilateral sort of communication. So yeah, I just decided to take the opportunity. I said, why not? And that turned out to be a really amazing opportunity because in the first, I guess, year and a half, but 2 years from 2018 to 2019, we started developing sort of design playbooks and strategies and services that we were offering. We were running design thinking workshops with customers all around the world, from Japan, South Africa, Europe, Americas, and then COVID hit. And at the time, before COVID, I was literally flying around with a tube of rolled up paper templates and a bag of post-it notes and markers and things like that that I would go to each one of these customers and then start setting up and run these design workshops. And then once COVID hit, I had a very quick realization that I'm like, I can't do my job now. I can't fly. So how am I going to do my job without being able to physically do it? So we got together, our team and I, when we decided to say, okay, this is when Mural and Miro were just sort of coming on board, and they really expanded, obviously, during COVID. And so what we designed was an entire design thinking system and tool set for Finastra that we could run digitally with our customers through a hybrid of Teams and Mural. And from there on in, it actually changed the way that we all worked together, because now we could actually have and run workshops with banks, for instance, that had operations in Ghana and South Africa and then London, and all three different departments could actually get together and have a simultaneous design session. Whereas before it was very siloed within the individual space, that physical space. So it really turned out well, and that was another leap of faith, I guess. And I'm happy to say that although I'm not an expert, I can definitely tell you the difference in between lending and treasury now, I guess.
I mean, really, the challenges that come up are an opportunity to innovate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're really never challenges. They're definitely a catalyst for innovation and new ways of thinking. And actually, because of your change in modalities, you are able to expand your services, make them even richer experiences, even do more for the financial services industry because of having to reposition your thinking, just like your former CEO, SAP MENA region, leaves. He's in the Finastra and he says, you know what, I need more innovative thinking, right? So what happens is then you design, and as global head of customer design innovation, you lead customer-centric product strategy. You mentored and hacked to the future series, ran designing a product that sticks workshops, and so you got an existing classical ship. You have to come in and rethink, how do we innovate and move that classical thinking? COVID comes, and then again, you have this classical way of doing things. Now these workshops, or they're on innovation, and it forces you to innovate. And in fact, it's a catalyst, it inspires you to innovate again, where you even are doing more. So you took Finastra and you got them to do more. You with COVID, what it forced, it was a forcing function to do further innovation, to produce even richer experiences and to even reach more markets and having more integration of global teams. And in fact, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, that kind of thinking, multi-stakeholder, that's where things have to be today. You can't work in individual silos, and the way the world is going. So it's just such a great sort of series of events, but you had the ability to adapt and then to not only adapt but to continue that innovation and growth. So it's an amazing history. So how did that lead to the Dubai Future Foundation?
Well, that was so Finastra went through a large cut in 2022, and they basically took away all non-essential services, including innovation. So myself and my entire team globally were basically laid off. And so I spent the next almost year, honestly, trying to figure out where, what next, how is it going to work. Did a few little side projects to keep the mind going. But one of the most important things, especially if you're looking for a job, is networking, right? So I happened to, while I was at SAP, one of the major projects that I was helping out with was Expo 2020. And I was very good friends with the CIO at the time and the deputy CIO. So I was speaking with the CIO just over in the Magilus one day, and he was asking me, what would you like to do? And I said, I always mentioned Dubai Future Foundation was sort of like my dream job. And then I was actually with coffee again a couple of weeks later with the deputy CIO. And she was asking me the same thing, where would you like to work? So I put it out to the world. I said, ideally, Dubai Future Foundation to me is the pinnacle of, innovation for government services. I'm like, that's exactly where I would love to work. And a couple of months later, the recruiter actually reached out and asked me to have an interview. And then so the first interview went very well. And then they asked me in 1 week to put together a business case come up with a novel idea in order to attract and retain top talent and families in Dubai based on the UAE National Innovation Strategy. Go. So it was one kind of PowerPoint slide, and I had a week to put together. And so I was able to come up with a business plan on building a metaverse for schools, where each student would have a digital twin, and the digital twin would be able to participate in any kind of curriculum that they would want within a metaverse and still get accredited for it within the KHDA system or whatever system it is, just the same as they would get accredited for attending a physical class at their usual schools. So what I was trying to do is open up the avenue to say, okay, if you want to attract and retain top talent in Dubai, they don't necessarily physically have to be here. And this is when, for example, MIT was launching their famous computer science course. I think it's 301. So they had actually built this completely within AI, and it was the first year that they were launching it. And we were seeing places within like Seoul, Korea, where they're building a public metaverse and different institutions. So I said, okay, well, we're right there. Like it's so close. So I took it in, and I had a chance to present to the deputy CEO at DFF. And I remember when I went in to present him, he looked at me straight in the eye. He's like, look, I don't believe in the metaverse, but I'll let you tell your story. And I was able to convince him that at least maybe the idea was not up to his likings, but at least the process that I went through, he was really appreciative. So I was lucky enough to get a job there at Dubai Future Foundation.
And then you get involved in reports like you're contributing acknowledged in the 15 AI use cases in government, and that's in 2023, I think.
Yeah,
Dubai Future Foundation, and then you got involved in the Global 50 report as well, 2025 edition, which
a little bit, yeah.
really between those two really fits at this intersection of foresight and tech initiatives and research advisory, kind of design thinking as well, because you're really looking at new spaces like health and society, technology, and so on. So how did you get into those projects? Just a natural flow of working within the Dubai Future Foundation, or are these things that you ideate? Like, what's the process? So I don't know if you even could talk about the process, but do you have something like
Yeah, we can talk about.
okay, so what's the
Yeah,
process
yeah, for sure.
for different kinds of
I mean,
projects within the Dubai Future Fund?
I mean, essentially, so I guess as a strategic consultant or a senior consultant at in Dubai Center of Artificial Intelligence. So if you could imagine something like the AI blueprint that comes out. So Sheikh Hamdan launches the AI blueprint. It has certain programs that they would like to launch in the blueprint. And right after they basically announce this to the public, this lands on the desk of our executive director in DCAI. And they say, okay, you need to figure out how to do this. Um, so So one of them was when I first arrived, they had already been working on this program originally. So what they had done is reached out to about 33 different government entities and asked them for AI use cases that they were currently working on. So we received about 263, I think, AI use cases at that point in time, and then consolidated them down into sort of 15 major use cases across different sectors that we could then highlight. One, the use case on how AI is actually transforming this particular entity or this particular government entity. And two, how is this impacting Dubai? And then three, what are the benefits to society by doing this? So it was very much a what, a why, and a how kind of approach that we took through the use cases. So then from there, we just worked with a colleague of mine, Ahmed, and put together. Yeah, we just wrote it out, tried to understand where they were being used, help interview and study how these use cases were being adopted, what kind of value were they receiving from it, and then we're able to develop the 15 use cases. Now for the 15, for the Global 50 report, this is spearheaded by Dr. Heba from the Research Institute, Research and Foresight Institute. And through them, so in the first year where I came, I got very close with Dr. Heba, and because I really appreciated her research and the way that she tries to understand and how she can articulate the future so far ahead. And then in the second year, I was able to actually just basically somewhat advise or interject in terms of, okay, what type of programs am I seeing being developed? What type of foresight and innovation is going on globally that I'm seeing within my own research, and hopefully trying to create partnerships or help validate some of the ideas within the Global Top 50 report, so that ultimately what would happen is once that 50 report is released, again, the same thing would happen like the AI blueprint. These top 50 would come in, and if there's any AI projects, then usually they would come back to Dubai Future Founded, to the Dubai Center of Artificial Intelligence, and then someone say, okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, I've been inserting some of this work within my keynotes where I say, I actually point to the reports and say, and then here are some insights that, so I cite the Dubai Future Foundation reports and then pull some of my own insights from those, but refer back to and say, to the audience, you need to look at these really marvelous reports, particularly the 2025, because it's so relevant now, right?
Yes, very. Yeah.
And really, top-notch, top-tier report. So you worked on these amazing different projects, really career-wise, and you're really not that old yet. You're so pretty young.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so what's happening now? In fact, I was there not too long ago in September. I was the opening keynote on the innovation investment side for WHX TAC, which is like a major health Expo. But then the Canadian Business Council brought us together, and you were moderating, you were the host of that. So maybe that's another question too. How did you get involved in the Canadian Business Council? And you're always there, or at least in the events I've done so far, you're there, right? So, and you're heading up things within that. So can you talk about that entity? But keep in mind, I just finished an interview with Diana, so
Yeah.
you got some background. But what are you doing with them,
Okay.
and what are you doing currently now?
So just recently I've kind of shifted from to my future foundation and looking to actually move back into the consulting world. So there's an opportunity that I'm working on right now, um, where they've asked me to put together a go-to-market strategy for AI and education for UAE and Saudi. So I need to understand, okay, how is AI in education going to be adopted? What kind of governments do we need? What type of strategy do they need? What type of design principles do they need in order to develop? And then a go-to-market strategy as well, in terms of customer and revenue. So that's what I've been currently focusing on, helping to understand what are who's the primary market, the secondary markets, and then whatever the stepping stones or kind of the events or the relationships that we need to build in order to help develop a responsible sort of AI adoption of AI in the education world, at least for UAE and KSA. So that's kind of where my brain's at right now.
So
On
let me
top of,
interject in, is
yeah,
that
please.
for private industry and government, or is it?
It is. It's with consulting. So it's with Capgemini.
Capgemini, I see, right? Major consulting company, right?
Yeah. So I
That's
figured,
a big project,
yeah. Oh, you know what? It's big, but it's so needed.
right?
Um, I mean, I was just having a conversation with KHDA the other day, and we were discussing. I was talking about my responsible AI framework for children, and how do we adopt it, and how do we sort of partner in terms of if we want to run surveys or get together with parents, and then how do things work? And even they are, I mean, they've done the sort of ethical guidelines and the codes and the structure, but they're still sitting, much like many companies in the entire global workforce, to be honest. The actual adoption of AI to value there's such a huge gap right now because people really don't understand how to get the value out of AI, right? It's still so mythical, I think, from a practical perspective. So this is my idea that yes, it may be challenging, but the market is there, the innovation. So for example, for in KSA, they're trying to train 6 million students in AI. That's 6 million, kids in AI over the next couple of years. And as you may know, here in the UAE, they've adopted AI in schools all the way from kindergarten to grade 12. So these are mandates that are being put out by the leadership, right? And so the likes of, Ministry of Education, KHDA and sorts, they have to adopt this because it's coming down their pipeline, whether they like it or not. And I just feel like they need help on how to do this. Uh,
There's the CEO Leadership Alliance. I don't know if I did an introduction to them. So back in 2020, and I'm in executive working group with them. They wanted to look at different ways of maybe enabling talent. And so the idea of AI came up. In fact, I was one of the ones who put it forward, um, because of my background in AI, and so it became an AI talent initiative. So it's from K to 12 to college to employers are involved, definitely governments, counties. That's now expanded to a much broader initiative called the National Talent Collaborative, throughout all of the
okay.
U.S. with over 37 leadership groups. And these leadership groups are things like the New York chapter leadership group would have things like the Job Council of New York. It would have Jamie Dimon
Okay.
in there, who's the CEO JP Morgan, there's Brian Moynihan, Bank of America, so really, and McKinsey is involved. So there's all these different players now. Maybe there's some knowledge sharing that can occur between them and what you're doing, because they've been on this track since 2020. So it's now 5 years, right?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and integrating it through curriculums, some of the best practices that have occurred. So anyways, I just want to let you think about that, but because we have time constraints on the interview, I
Yeah,
think
of
that there could
course.
be other global parties. I'm definitely integrated into some of the stuff that's happening in Singapore and other parts of the world. So, okay, so I can see the value of that program because I'm involved in that kind of programming already and for
Yeah.
years now, right? So, um, wow, that's an I can see why you took that on. And it has huge impact. And then you could take those learnings, you could take it global into other regions of the world too, as well, right?
Inshallah, as they say here. Inshallah.
What a great opportunity too, because it has global impact and it's fundamentally needed. And as you mentioned, there's a big gap right now, and that gap has to be addressed because this stuff is just accelerating like crazy, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's we only have a few minutes left. So, how did you get into the business council? What are you doing there? Because you're very active there.
So I mean, just being Canadian, I've always been interested in helping develop Canada, helping promote Canada, helping Canadian welfare, businesses that come to Canada. So I've been, you know, touch and go with the CBC since essentially I moved here in 2015. And then I would say over the last year, really, when we started running AI Week, I met with Diana and we hit it off immediately, as you, as you probably did as well. And so we just got discussing about, AI strategy and what types of AI companies are coming out of Canada. Um, I was just really interested around how is Canada doing in comparison to the world because I'm really not in touch with the Canadian as much as I'd like to be. So through then, we just got discussing, and then Dinah said, "Look, we need someone who can help if they're AI or any kind of tech business that want to come down and know more about Dubai and know more about the culture and know more about setting up business and where to go and how does it operate." And she said it'd be amazing to have you on board to help sort of facilitate that, to be a sort of helping hand if anybody has any questions. So through there, I said, yeah, absolutely. I think it's an amazing opportunity to be, they're calling it the AI and tech lead at CBC. But essentially, I'm just going to be here to help spread the positive news, spread the good wealth of Canada, what they're doing around AI and tech, and to see if we can help grow the Canadian economy here in Dubai.
Yeah, and in fact, you were the moderator and it is in essence hosted this session when I was there just a few weeks ago. But it was really on AI and healthcare, right? Or the
Yeah,
transformations that
like
occurring in healthcare, and I really enjoyed that time. I wish we had another hour because then I could get into, because you've been involved with so much foresight work, then I could say, what's going to happen with quantum? Is AI going to hit AGI and ASI? In fact, maybe just in 1 minute, do you think we're going to hit AGI, artificial general intelligence, super intelligence before 2030?
I'm gonna flip the coin on you here. And you said something that was actually that resonated with me the other day so well. And when you mentioned when you were speaking to Jeffrey Hinton about how AI should be, and you mentioned how it needs to take on more of a maternal instinct.
Right.
So if I think AGI will become paternal, paternal by 2030, yes. Do I think it can have general maternal intelligence? No. If I can, yeah.
So, Jeff Hinton says it could be 10-20% possibility we're going to have some problems here. But we need to leave that. I only have a couple of minutes because I have another interview coming up. So
Yeah.
this, unfortunately, I wish we could dive into more of the
Yeah.
part, right? Because you and I
And
can have a lot of fun with that.
that's the chess brain talking, and then the ADHD brain talking. Yeah, for sure.
So and that's a great sort of insight that you just gave. Okay, so we only had about a minute and a half left. What would you say would be the recommendations you want to leave the audience and questions you want to leave the audience? So recommendations, and then what questions you think the audience should be asking themselves?
So the one thing I want to ask is going back to that discussion that my wife and I had, where there's a one side where one parent does not have the trust of AI, and then there's the other parent who has trust and can see the potential of what AI can bring. Now, the delta in between the two is monumental. And so what I would like to understand, and this is where my research is trying to go, is how do we develop trust in AI so that we can enable our future generations to responsibly use AI for good? That would be my question.
Okay, well, that's a great set of takeaway for the audience. So, Chris, thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience. What a great history, by the way, and it's continuing. I mean, you're just over young.
Thank you.
So it's continuing.
Appreciate it. Yeah, same.
I mean, I can just see all of the major contributions you're going to continue to make. It's just a fabulous really path you've taken and influencing and contributing so much. So thank you for sharing some of the details. And we could have spent a half a day actually because you're doing so much.
Yeah.
So thank you again for coming.
We didn't even talk about you either. So
I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing so much and so many insights with our audience. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.